1923. In Paris, there was a feeling of exuberance in the streets. Young people wanted to forget the war and have fun. With its air of insolence and avant-gardism, the Golden Twenties was a time of transgression. Bodies were freed of their constraints, sexuality also. Pilou was a young man of 19. He dreamt of bright lights and sequins. He lived in Avalon, a small town of central France. But he knew that one day he would go to Paris and fully embrace his desire for men. His photo albums provide a rare account of the life of a young gay man in the Golden Twenties. They give a snapshot into the glory days that would soon be threatened by the rise of extremism in Europe.
Even as a small child, I would beg my mother to allow me to wear a dress. As a teenager, I made everyone laugh when I imitated girls. One day, I even arrived in the boys' playground dressed in a skirt. At school, at church, or in the army, people always found me a little different, separate somehow. I never did anything bad, but everything I did was wrong. I used to say that somewhere else there must be boys like me. I've always loved being noticed, being looked at, having my photo taken. I was an only child, one of a kind, as my father would say. My name is Pilou. I have been lucky. I grew up in a family that couldn't care less about conventions and what other people thought. Father was a carpenter, and mother a cook. I wanted for nothing. I was the focus of everything, of photos and of their affection. Apparently, I inherited from my grandmother. Mamie Aline was the funniest and least predictable woman I ever knew. I loved her imagination. She would always play any role I asked her to. She agreed all of my far-fetched ideas. She'd experienced her moment of glory, and she still talked about it when she used to sing in cabarets, when men used to fall at her feet. She was, without a doubt, the most important person in my life. She passed on to me her love for music. I'm not particularly good at the piano, but what I love is how my emotions carry me away, no matter the wrong notes. My cousin Etienne had just moved in with us at home. He was 23. He was an only child like me. As self-centered as I was. I must admit that initially the idea did not appeal, but Mamie insisted. Etienne had recently lost his mother. He was in mourning. In photos, he is smiling, but I know he was devastated by grief. He spent hours shut up in his room. I even heard him cry. One morning, I forced him to go for a walk, to take his mind off things. I launched into a long, slightly ridiculous speech about how life flashes by, about how death should never stop us from living life to the fullest. It took just one summer for Etienne and I to become inseparable. I had dreamt about it forever, and it was Etienne who convinced me to have a go. I joined the small theatre company in Avalon. We practiced every Saturday and once a month in the hall. The whole town came to see us and applaud. We were called La Tomate. That's me in the middle of the photo. We did Shakespeare, vaudeville. And in every production, I always made sure I played a female role. I played young girls in the flower of youth, wives who had been cheated on, duchesses and tearful mothers. On stage, I could do what I dreamt about doing in real life, dressing as a woman without anyone batting an eyelid.
In the years after the First World War, young people rebelled against conventions, even if it meant transgressing moral codes. Women had held the fort at home during the war, and now believed themselves to be free and independent. They dressed like tomboys, they drank, smoked, and flirted with strangers on cafe terraces. Sexual mores were less restricted. Everyone wanted to fulfill their desires and live their personal lives as they pleased.
In 1926, La Tomate had come to an end. Whatever Etienne said, I knew I wasn't very talented. We always did the same type of play. Our audience eventually got bored. Etienne opened a garage in Avalon. We were still just as close as ever, but now I was working at the post office. Frustrated in my formal suit during the week, I cross-dressed in the weekend in private. I would rummage along Mammy's belongings and try on everything. Lipsticks, tights, skirts. I was half man, half woman. Neither a man nor a woman. And I liked it. At home, I made everyone laugh. But cross-dressing is not simply entertainment. I didn't want to act like a woman. I just wanted to be a man who dressed as a woman. Once, only once, did Etienne agree to take off his mechanic's overalls and put on a dress. Maybe it was to make me happy. Maybe it was because I insisted. But despite all our efforts, we never did find heels that fitted. The reality was that in Avalon, I was starting to feel lonely. That's Gustavo, a family friend. Whenever he turned up in Avalon, there was always a party. He also had a touch of eccentricity about him. I adored him. Gustavo knew straight away that I was like him, a man that liked men. He was Italian and wore a suit like nobody else. He worked in a fashion house in Paris. I grew a moustache and started to slick back my hair just like him. Gustavo wanted to introduce me to Paris. Me, a nobody from Avalon. You should have seen me dressed in my suit, starry-eyed. Etienne lent me his most beautiful car. And off I went, full speed towards the capital. That night, Gustavo had invited me to see a show by the legendary Barbette.
Barbette was one of the most famous drag artists of the 1920s. He was American, but first and foremost, he was a talented trapeze artist. His performances brought him fame throughout Europe. At this time, there were more and more cross-dressing cabarets in Paris, London, and Berlin. The clientele came in evening dress, with drag being the only way many gay men were able to protect their anonymity. A stone's throw from the Eiffel Tower at the Magic City amusement park, the Mid-Lent Ball was the once-a-year opportunity for the queer, as they were known, to have a night of freedom. On that evening, cross-dressers, gays and lesbians all met up on the dance floor for a night of excess.
Finally, I had made it to the big city. Paris was mine for the taking. I was now working at the post office in the 9th arrondissement. Gustavo had found me a small one-bedroom apartment on the 5th floor of a building not far from my work. Etienne was there when I moved in. He was happy for me. It was the start of a new life. I was nervous, a bit like opening night at the theatre in Avalon. I wandered around the streets of Paris. In the crowds of people, no one noticed me. No one looked at me. And for the first time in my life, I met men like me. Sometimes I would still cross-dress. Here in Paris, I was even bold enough to go out into the streets. I would brave the looks from passers-by and sit down at a cafe and then return home. Etienne often came to visit. I introduced him as my brother. He spent time with the boys without making a comment, without judging. I began to realize that not everybody was lucky enough to have a family that accepted them as they were. My little apartment became their refuge.